Today's episode is sponsored by A3 Environmental, a Midwest-based environmental consultancy firm. With 19 years of experience and 25 scientists across the country, they have both the experience and the resources. A3 specializes in environmental due diligence. They are frequently hired by banks, private equity groups, property buyers and sellers, and M&A attorneys. Recently heard of a situation that A3 got involved in where a bank and a buyer had ordered an environmental report. And when the environmental report came back, the seller looked at it and he was somewhat suspect to what the findings were. And he actually hired A3 to come in and refute some of those findings with the other environmental firm. And at the end of the day, A3 was able to find some faulty findings and got the report thrown out and a clear to close for the seller. And they were able to get to the closing table. So they've really got the right resources and the right people. So if your acquisition is in the industrial space, automotive or dry cleaning or plating, and the deal includes tanks or tubs, vats, drums, silos, or storage of any sort of hazardous chemicals, you'll definitely want A3 on your M&A team. Their motto is A3 Environmental Consulting, buy assets, not liabilities. Hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Looking to buy, sell, or grow your business to position it for a sale? As the owner and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, Dominic Rinaldi has personally been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. He has seen and done it all, consulting with large and small businesses across a broad range of industries. On M&A Unplugged, he'll interview buyers, sellers, and their advisors about their experiences scaling, selling, and acquiring businesses. On every episode, you will get key learnings, but most importantly, you will be better prepared for your own acquisition or sale. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Dominic Rinaldi.
I have to admit to a fair amount of personal gratification in introducing our guest today, Kathy Miller. Our M&A firm, Sun Acquisitions, got to play a small role in helping Kathy achieve a dream of selling her business and seamlessly moving into a very active and happy retirement. Kathy Miller is a force. She built her global woman-certified meeting and events management company from the basement of her home into one that managed premier events for many Fortune 50 companies around the world. Her company, Total Event Resources, became synonymous with excellence, evidenced by the more than 60 industry awards her and her company garnered. A graduate of the inaugural Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, she aspired to deliver outstanding support to the most prestigious companies in the world. Mission accomplished. As I mentioned earlier, this year, Kathy realized one of her dreams of selling her business and ensuring that her legacy will carry on. And now Kathy and her husband Dick, who played an integral role in the sale of her business, are enjoying the fruits of all those years of hard work and sacrifice. Kathy, welcome to M&A Unplugged. It's such a pleasure to have you here and so excited to have you share your journey.
Well, thank you, Dominic. And that was such a great introduction. I appreciate it.
Well deserved. You really are a force, getting to know you the way I have, and really so respect what you built and how you built it. Really amazing, building a family and a business, and amazing journey as I got to learn what you did. So for the M&A Unplugged community, could you talk a little bit about the business and your journey of building it?
Sure, absolutely. Actually, I think it's unusual. I didn't start a business to start a business. I really started a business to refocus my life because, as you said, children at home, I had 2 small kids, and both my husband and I were traveling like crazy, working like crazy, and a pair living with us. And I thought there's got to be a different way. And so I set out really to produce, back in the day, to produce 12 special events for the year. And I thought, well, with that, I could make a decent living. And fortunately, in 1995, the meeting and event business was booming and the special event business. And so I started building my business based on that.
And so you got the start, you built some events, and all of a sudden it starts to take off for you, huh?
It did. And it's interesting because 90% or more of my business was word of mouth, repeat business. And I was very fortunate at that time. The phone would ring and say, "Hey, I've been at that event that you just did in Orlando, and it was fabulous. And I'd like you to do this for a national sales meeting or a new product launch." And it was just me, and I would say, "Yes, yes, yes, this is great." And then I'd hang up the phone and go, "Wow, how am I going to make that happen?" And, after my first year of flying solo, I realized I needed some help. So I hired an intern, and that intern turned into a freelance person, then, went back to school. And then the freelance person came and worked with me. And then she left and started her own business. And then I was like, I need a full-time employee. And I hired my first full-time employee, and 15 full-time employees later, and big business all over the world. It just kept growing, fortunately.
So fast forward to you built this business. Just talk a little bit about what Total Event Resources actually did and the clientele that you were handling, because it was very impressive to see what you had built.
Thank you. In the beginning, we started out as a special event company, and that just meant that any corporate association or non-for-profit organization that was doing something in the events world of a gala, a incentive program where they were entertaining their top sales force, we would come in and produce those special events. Fast forward, when I sold the agency, we were producing marketing live events all over the world, from 9 people to 18,000 and everything in between, and very involved in the strategy, the creative, the production, the logistics, and the analytics of them.
And as I mentioned in my opening, I mean, you were doing this for Fortune 50 companies around the world on a global basis. So you're dealing with clients that have high demands, high expectations, want things to be perfect, and your company was delivering amazing events all over the world.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And our client base was pretty diverse, actually, in terms of the types of organizations that we represented.
So, Kathy, you built this business, you worked it for so many years, tons of sacrifices, and now you're in retirement. Just spend a minute talking about that. How does it feel? Is it what you thought it would be? How has the transition been out of the business into retirement?
So good.
That's great to hear.
That's my short, as they say, pithy answer. So good. I had a lot of people, I was in the industry for 40 plus years, and I started my career with Hyatt Hotels. I didn't know about this industry. So I actually grew into it and became extremely passionate. And, they say when you do what you love what you do. And for me, this side of the business was extremely gratifying. And a lot of people thought that I would be extremely challenged by retiring because they knew me so well. And I was very involved and, spent a lot of time building the business. But actually, I've enjoyed it quite a bit. And now my passion of traveling that I did professionally, I'm working on personally.
Are you yourself surprised at how seamless it has been to move away from the business?
Actually, a bit, yes.
You are. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, a
Interesting.
bit.
Did you do anything prior to selling the business or while you were in the process of selling to mentally prepare for the next step?
Absolutely. And it was a process because ultimately I started out probably 3 years prior on my own to think about it. And I think at that point, I went out independently looking for buyers, very limited, but I thought I had a couple that would be a great fit. And so I think that helped me kind of get my head around what it would be like to actually sell the business. Because it is like people talk about raising a family. It's kind of like that. And then you're going to give away your baby.
Yeah. So let me ask this, because there are some statistics out there that are alarming, that over 75% of owners, after they sell their businesses, have remorse. And not from a financial perspective. They might have gotten the number they wanted and very happy with the financial outcome, but they weren't really quite ready for this next step, and they had nothing to go towards. And so, did you do anything specific, or was there something that was pulling you that, made it easier to step away?
Well, we had bought a house in South Carolina, and my husband was living there, and I was living in Chicago.
Oh, that'll do
So
it.
perhaps 4 years of commuting there and traveling might have done it.
Hmm.
We also have a son who lives in Australia, and he just had a second baby boy, and that was tugging at my heart to travel to Australia for an extended amount of time. And so I got my head wrapped around it because of the things I wanted to do outside of working.
Yeah, so I think you just gave the M&A Unplugged community a real key nugget here, which is you really did have things that were pulling you away. And one of the things that as an owner you can do to, just do a quick emotional readiness test is, what would you do after you sell the business? What's pulling you? And you had another home in another state and grandkids. And so those are two of the key things we hear when, people are really emotionally ready. Those are the things that are pulling them. So,
And my other son was just starting medical school. He actually spent 3 years in Africa, and we went to visit him. And when he came back to Chicago, because he's in Chicago, and I left, but it was also time to give to him to help him in a way that we could get him set up for medical school.
that's great. That's great. So let's move to, and by the way, so happy that you and Dick are retired and enjoying it, and I know about to do some significant travel. So that's all awesome.
Thank
Let's
you.
go talk about the actual sale process. So as you referenced, you started to think about selling, and maybe even started to dip your toes in the water a number of years before you actually then did earnestly go down the process. What did you do to prepare the business for a potential sale? And I'm gonna ask a follow-up question to that, which is, when you look back, do you think you did enough, or do you think you could have done more?
Well, knowing my personality, there's always more to do. But having said that, it's interesting because if I go back to my beginning days, I think my preparation started with understanding that no matter what, you should always have an exit strategy. And so I think I started with that, even though my exit strategy changed on numerous occasions, and it wasn't like I was ready to exit at any given point. I just knew that someday what I was building, I was hopeful that a legacy would carry on. And it started with my kids. And I thought my boys would want to take over the business, in which case that did not happen. Because as I said, one went to Africa, one went to Australia. So that was kind of one preparation, which seems a little weird when I tell people about an exit strategy. It's just having that in mind. So in order to do that, there were things that had to happen. I mean, you've got to have your house in order. And what I mean by that is you really have to be able to have operationally systems and procedures, your standard operating procedures, all of that in place from a business perspective. I mean, there's a lot of different entities to having that set up. And when we really, in that 3-year prior period before we actually came to you, Dominic, we had a lot of work that we did on the back end, establishing our client base, making sure that we knew that the client base was indeed strong, contracts, that those were in place. Again, making sure operationally that we had our, because people are buying employees people are buying your systems and your processes. People are buying your client base and your reputation. All of that had to be in place to a point where someone else could take over successfully.
Kathy, that puts you in the very, very small percentage of all owners who are actually thinking about it and actively doing something about it. There's another statistic that, less than 25% of owners actually take steps like this to prepare their business so that they can exit, in the way they want, at the time they want, and hopefully at the, amount of money that they want. And so amazing that you took those steps, and it sounds like you took them from very early on.
Yes, and one other thing that I did do was I was always learning, whether it was about the industry or whether it was about the business. I had a board through an organization called Tech. I, received this scholarship with Goldman Sachs, which really helped me to understand where my business was in terms of the things I had in place and the things I needed to, and learning about the financial piece and the EBITDA and your cash flow and all of that was critical to really running a business and being able to sell it.
Yeah, I've heard great things about the Goldman Sachs program. I've met a number of people that have been through it, and I hear nothing but great things.
It's an amazing program. I'm so glad I did that.
So let's talk about the process that you went through once you decided to sell. So looking back, what are the things that surprised you in the process, in a good way and in a way that maybe frustrated you? It'd be very helpful to hear it from both sides.
Well, I think the thing that sort of surprised me was, in the end, we sold the business, which was not a surprise from the standpoint of was it valuable and viable, but I had never sold a business before. So, for me, the end result was success, and that was quite a pleasant surprise. And in our industry, entrepreneurial companies can be very difficult to sell, which is probably a whole separate conversation. I think the thing that was, the process once it got started was, and you told us this, it was going to be potentially, a lengthy process, a roller coaster, a lot of work. And we went down that path, and all of that did come true. So I guess in some way that was surprising.
And what went the way that you thought it would go? Were there things that happened and you're like, yeah, I really thought that would happen, and it did?
I don't know if and this may sound strange, I don't know if I had that kind of insight to think about it, because quite frankly, if I take a step back, the credit for selling this business needs to go to my husband, because fortunately I had him to do all of the hard work and legwork. We were great together doing it, where I could keep building the business and running the business and working on the business while he was working on selling the business.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even when you hire an advisor to sell your business, there's still so much to be done. And as you referenced, your husband, Dick, he really took on a lot of the data requests and information and coordination with the attorneys when time came for that, and with the accountant, and allowed you to stay, like you said, focused on the business right up to the very end, where I think you were doing one of your biggest events ever, right? At the
Yes.
very end.
And signing a contract, a
signing
huge contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which the new owner, was very happy with, right? Because he could
Yes.
see the momentum in the business was continuing because you were allowed to be focused on it. So yeah,
Yes.
tremendous.
Which I think is really important. That momentum piece can be difficult because, when you talked about mindset, if you get your mindset out of selling your business, or you get it into selling your business, then you ultimately are thinking about what you're going to do beyond your business, but you have to keep your business going all the way to the end.
Without a doubt. We've been in situations before in our firm where businesses are in decline because owners have sort of taken their eye off the ball, and it becomes very difficult when that happens. Buyers get very nervous, either disappear or start to ask lots of questions, which now takes the owner even further away from their business. So it can have a multiplying effect when that happens.
Yes, absolutely.
What pieces of the process as you got into them did you see created leverage for you in the sale? So whether that was, external resources or the process, or as you look back on it, leverage is such an important thing when you're looking to sell a business. What would you say provided you the largest leverage as we were going through the process?
Well, I think if you get down to some of the things that maybe sound basic or trite but are important, the reputation of our agency was very important, well established. We had a great reputation in the industry. Our buyer knew of our reputation. We had a extremely strong client base and quite a diverse client base, as well as the types of projects that we were working on. The fact that we were producing meetings and events all over the world, not just in the Chicagoland area. I think the fact that our employees were tenured, and you could look at that and be like, wow, I can walk away and the employees are in place, and that's, I believe, an important aspect for a seller. So those would be kind of the top things I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree. I think you spent a lot of time and effort making sure that your client base was diversified, your employees were solidified, and your operations were really running smoothly, which gives you tremendous leverage as you're taking the business to market. So let's talk a little bit about the process of actually, we call it the dance of meeting with buyers. And you met with quite a few. I mean, there were quite a number of buyers and different types of buyers. You had very large companies interested, right down to high net worth individuals. Talk about that process for you. What was that like? What were those meetings like as they, maybe your first ones, and then as you got, into them and you were doing more and more?
Yes. Now maybe that was part of the surprise and the piece that was most, I say, surprising, because there was such a diverse group of people. And you did put a lot of different individuals and companies in front of us. And it gave us an opportunity to really also think about the right buyer, which I think is really important also, because, the first couple of individuals that came forward, I was like, no, those aren't the right individuals. And that became, a really significant piece that I don't think I really thought about until it started to happen. And I got to evaluate also, so it wasn't just a one-sided evaluation of, well, do they want to buy us, but do I want to sell to them? And, for me, I did want the company to live on and have a legacy for, the gentleman that bought the company. He has an opportunity to, grow it for another 25 years, which to me makes me so happy. And there were some buyers that was like, they're not going to be the right buyers, and I don't think it could be successful.
Yeah, so Kathy, you bring up another really key point, which is when you're in those meetings with buyers, typically there's an introduction back and forth, and then the buyers launch into a whole host of questions, and those meetings can go for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. But it's so important as the owner of the business to also be, vetting the buyer back and have coming in with your own questions, because in most cases, your legacy matters, and you want to know that the person that's going to take over is going to take care of the company that you've spent all these years building, and your employees and your clients who are probably friends.
Absolutely. All of that. And, well-rounded and making sure that they did all of that, not just the clients, being mindful of the business, the employees, all of that was really important.
How did you know that the buyer that ultimately bought it was the right one? I mean, what was there something in particular that happened or a moment in time or something that he said or did where you said, yeah, you know what? I hope we can get to the closing table with this buyer.
Yes, his background, because he was someone who had, been in the industry, had been on the destination management side of the industry, had run an office, had owned a business before, was extremely passionate, and I could tell he had some very strong drive to want to continue to, keep the momentum going for the company. I think all of that came out in the conversations that we were able to have with them through the process.
That's great. So moving on from that, so you had a whole bunch of buyers, you had multiple offers on the business. One, did that surprise you? And then what did you think about the negotiating process? What did you learn from all of that that would be helpful for the M&A Unplugged community to hear?
That's a great question. Well, I think there's more than one way to get a deal done, meaning, what you were talking about is it's not all about the price necessarily, even though obviously that's important because, that sets you up for the future. But I guess what I mean by it's not just about the price is, and that there's multiple ways to get a deal done, is that, are you staying on for 3 years? Are you going to stay on for 2 years? What do you want your involvement to be? Do you want to be, gone in 3 months or 6 months? How do you get paid out? All of those things I think are part of what the process is. Hearing how somebody's going to grow your business or change your business or bring forward their own ideas. And not that you're going to be deeply involved in every single thing, but I think from a high level, understanding what their strategy is about the business. Those were all really important in making that decision. So I think what I learned was, in the end, there isn't necessarily only one way to make a deal.
Yeah, and kudos to you because you had an open mind to all of that because we got a fair number of offers that had crazy deal structures to them, and were just curious about all of them and asked all the right questions, and we went through them, and I think that was exactly the right way to approach it because it does go beyond price and terms, right? All those other little things matter and sometimes can make or break a deal.
Yes.
So you sign the deal with the ultimate buyer and then you move into due diligence. And I know Dick really was instrumental in that process because he took on a lot of the heavy lifting of providing the documents for the data room and so on and so forth. But looking back on the diligence part of the deal, what surprised you there? What did you think about that particular step in the process?
And you gave us a really good heads up, I think, about the due diligence. And even though you did, all of it was still surprising in that we knew that it was going to be a lot of work and a lot of information required. And, Dick chipped away at it hour by hour, minute by minute, day by day. I still think that we had no idea the amount of due diligence and that one thing would lead to another question and another question. We spent a lot of time in our due diligence for sure. And I don't know if that's average, normal, or not, but in any case, I think it's still the thing that was pretty surprising of like, oh yeah, this is a lot of work.
Yeah, so diligence is very intrusive and time consuming. You like it to go fast, but it rarely does. And especially when there's a bank involved and they're asking lots of questions, which the buyer did secure a loan from a bank, an SBA loan to acquire this business. So it's not just the buyer asking the questions, it's the bank and maybe other people as well. And so it can be very time consuming. And I think it goes back to your point of you know, the more preparation you can do in advance of a sale, the better. And if you have somebody that can help you deliver on a lot of those requests, it helps you maintain your focus on the business. And thankfully, you had that situation.
I was very lucky to have Dick in place to help with it.
I would echo that. So Kathy, as we, close up the interview, I'd like you to, maybe now get above the trees and get at the 50,000 foot level for a minute for the M&A Unplugged community. And, if you were to, give some high level advice to the folks in the community out there who are maybe thinking about selling now or, in the future, what advice would you offer to those sellers?
Well, for sure, I would say have your house in order. So be prepared, what you were just talking about. That's really important. And you don't know, so to the second piece, you don't know how prepared you really are until you enlist the experts. So, it's kind of like what I advised my clients when they came to me. Sure, they could do it themselves or they could hire the experts. And we were the experts in our field. And fortunately, we found the experts in our field for selling a business to help us, including you, Dominic, but it also included our attorney and our CPA. And, I had a business advisor that I also worked with in all of that. So really, that's a critical piece. I think, making sure that you have your desires for the future of what you want to do and what that exit strategy looks like for you, what you're willing to accept and not accept. Staying active in the business, I think, was critical for the success of our sale. And then the last piece, which we didn't really talk about, but that was pretty much drilled in our head and made so much sense not going through the process, was the confidentiality. And keeping the confidentiality of this deal was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. And yet it was one of the most important pieces as well.
I usually wrap here, but that is such an important nugget. Let's spend a minute on it. When you talk about confidentiality, so talk about what you mean specifically, and then what were the issues that you were grappling with around confidentiality so people can understand that.
So ultimately, making sure you tell no one, and I mean no one, that you're trying to sell your business, because that ultimately can make a deal go away in a heartbeat. And in fact, did for us once, because we did bring our team involved, for a merger, and it didn't help the process, it hindered it. So when we wanted to bring in our key executive to help us with the financial piece, she had a lot of information because that was her job. So, you have a chief financial officer and they're managing all of that, but now you got to get it out of their hands without asking, without asking them or asking them and not telling them why. And that became a huge struggle of being able to just get the information that we needed. In the end, the funny piece, and the employees, don't tell the employees because then they get scared and they don't know what's about to happen. So they want to leave and you need them. And, you always advised us, when the time came, don't lie, but don't have the conversation. And so, the week before the deal, something really strange happened, in which case our new buyer was out to try and get some checks with our company name, and the check company called my chief financial officer and said, "Oh, somebody's trying to get checks." And that was the week before, and it was like, okay, now I have to tell her what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know where it's going to come. Even my children, they had no idea until we sold the business. And all of that's very difficult because you want to say to people, oh, this is happening. But the minute you do, someone tells somebody else, and then the next thing you know, the deal's off the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. We talk to people about this all the time. We've seen so many breaches or threatened breaches, and it just doesn't help the process in any way. And, look, there are thoughtful questions that come back around, well, I've worked with, my employees for 30 years. I feel like I'm betraying them. Yes, but there are counter issues to that. Like you can't answer any of the questions they're about to ask. Who's the new buyer, new owner? Does everything stay the same? Like you can't answer those questions. And when you can't
Right.
answer questions for employees, they get nervous. And the last thing you can afford to have happen when you're selling the business is have people leave, because then the value of your business will inevitably decline, and maybe even to the point where you can't sell it. So it's a hard thing to do, but it really is in everyone's best interest. And I can give you countless examples of that. So I think it's great advice, Kathy.
Great. Thank you.
So Kathy, from time to time, I like to ask guests what their favorite book is that they've ever read. And I'm very curious to hear what yours is.
Well, I actually have two. One was given to me by a friend when I first started my business. It's called The E-Myth Revisited. Michael Gerber is the author, and they also have a whole series of training and education, but they started with this one easy book, right? And it was about working on your business versus in your business. And so that was great. Another one for leadership was Fierce Conversations, and it helps you to understand how to have conversations as a leader and a business owner that you don't necessarily want to have. Then I'm going to give you two podcasts since you're doing podcasts.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
You do a M&A Unplugged podcast, which, believe it or not, I've listened to every series, and I'm retired and love them. And then our meeting and event industry has a great podcast called Gather Geeks. Okay. So those would be my recommendations.
That's great. That's great. Well, Kathy, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and so happy that you are enjoying retirement and about to do some really big traveling, and so excited for you.
Thank you, Dominic, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So M&A Unplugged community, all of the information will be available in the show notes. Just to summarize a few key points that Kathy brought up. She mentioned that 3 years prior to selling, she started really mentally preparing. And we've seen statistics that over 75% of owners, when they walk away, have some remorse about selling, and not from a financial perspective, but it's more around they didn't know what they were going to go do next. And so Kathy took the time to really think about that and get ready, and has resulted in a pretty seamless exit for her and transition out of the business. Very rare that I hear this from anybody, but Kathy built the business with an exit strategy in mind from the beginning. So making sure that her operations were in place, that she had documentation, financials, contracts, all those sorts of things. It's so rare that I hear that, but so important. It makes it so much easier when you go to transition the business, and gives buyers a ton of confidence. The other thing Kathy talked about was maintaining momentum in the business while you're selling. Critical that the business continue to do well while you're in the process of selling. And then she also talked about meeting with buyers and making sure that it's a two-way street. Buyers are going to come and ask you a ton of questions, but you should be doing, some vetting back to make sure that you're comfortable with those buyers taking over and running your legacy, and they're going to take care of your clients and your employees for the long term. So really appreciated having Kathy on. Again, all the information is in the show notes. If you would like to learn more about the process of acquiring or selling a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com, or feel free to reach out to me at drinaldi@sunacquisitions.com. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.
Thank you for joining us today on M&A Unplugged. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and recommend it wherever you get your podcasts. If you want more great information on how to scale, acquire, or sell a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com.